needs to excuse himself. Plenty of places he can go.
We'll get a nice day if they'll win.
Thanks for asking. And I guess we'll get going here. Good morning. How you doing? You want to play a little background music for Bible study? Just little mood music? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, morning everybody. Good to have you here as we finish up the book of Ezekiel. And let's see. Last week, did we get through chapter 43 or did we get to 43 and stop? Does anybody recall? I did not make a note. And it's all kind of, I can't remember what I reviewed myself and what we all reviewed together. So does anybody have a recollection? I meant to stop with the glory of the Lord returning to Israel. You don't? Oh, okay. Yes. Doesn't sound familiar. The glory of the Lord returning to Israel? We did? You feel confident? Okay. Son of man, this is a place. This is where I will live. Boy. Yes, we did. That's right. I do remember talking about verse 10. Son of man, describe the temple to the people of Israel, that they may be ashamed of their sins. Let them consider the plan. And how that was maybe different at first than we might expect. Okay, good. That's now I recall all that. We'll start with chapter 44 and kind of skim through the end and hopefully get to the end of chapter 48. So let's pray now that the Lord would bless this study. Lord, we do thank you for your word, for this message you gave Ezekiel, this wonderful temple vision, and help us to appreciate it. Help us to appreciate your holiness among us and to strive to be your holy people here on earth, giving praise to you and setting ourselves apart from this world by listening to your voice, by obeying the things you say, and by trusting and worshiping you alone. We ask your blessing and your presence now in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so we get to chapter 44, and we've already seen this huge temple, and we've already seen the Lord return to it last week, and we saw that verse 12 of chapter 43 said, "This is the law of the temple. All the surrounding area on top of the mountain will be most holy. Such is the law of the temple." And we saw how big the temple is. I think it was like, about a square mile almost. It was very big area. Bigger than, today, if they would do that, they would have to bulldoze a lot of Jerusalem and flatten it and level it. Yes? Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's the big mystery. Why did God give this 9 chapter, I guess, including 40, vision of something that never actually got built? And it's hard to, you can't say, why did God do something? You can just say, well, what are the effects of it? In other words, what does this communicate to us? And that must be why he did it. He wanted to communicate that. So this certainly impresses upon us his holiness. It is a contrast with the real. Remember earlier when he went into the real temple and how corrupt it was, and it was really disgusting. And now you have this beautiful, perfect temple. But you're right, it's not something that ever actually was built. So in our mind, it seems like kind of a weird waste of, not that we would ever accuse God of wasting ink or something, but we don't quite understand why you would communicate in this way. Then again, I don't know that the people back then, that this would have immediately made sense either. So I don't know, any other thoughts on that, or we can continue thinking about it as we go through. He wants to impress upon them his holiness and his dwelling, and those are two things that a temple definitely shows. Yes? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 So it's showing that he's returning. And it is a symbol, and maybe the bigger issue is just we're very precise, scientific-minded people, and so we don't do as well with symbolism. But it's all symbolic. And so maybe it doesn't immediately grab us, but we can at least study it and appreciate that. Partly it doesn't grab us because we don't live in a world filled with temples. Even in Babylon they were surrounded by temples. They were just temples to false deities. And so this is another way of saying, look, the Lord's temple is the biggest, the best, the most perfect. It's a temple of unreal proportions. And I guess if you're trying to communicate what is the church, what is the future presence of God going to be like among his people, and you can't just describe it because they can't conceive of a literal description of the church, or just because you want to give them a symbol, a huge temple where God is dwelling kind of fits. I mean, that's what the church is today. It's like, we are God's temple, and God's temple is spread out in the world. But you can see how that fits. What were you going to say?
I just wanted to know, when you were in Hong Kong or
Yeah.
when you were in Israel, did you go into temples or mosques?
Oh, no rioting?
No
Oh, notoriety. Yes, in Hong Kong, where there are temples, many of them are tourist destinations. However, you don't always go into the temple. Sometimes you just go to the grounds where they have nice gardens and you look at the nice architecture. I think I mentioned this one other time a couple years ago, but the Christians there look at the temple differently than the American tourists because those temples, their family might still be worshiping there and they're worshiping false gods. So whereas we might go and just see it as a cultural thing of interest, to them it's like, why would you go to a false worship location? And so when we first got there, I went into one or two, but then I kind of stopped going when I realized, hey, this is still an active worship place of a false god. I would never go into a mosque, though. I don't know if I'd be allowed or not, but I wouldn't want to go, personally. All right, so anyway, these are some reasons why God, or I shouldn't say why he's doing this. These are some things we can get out of it and we can think about. But today we get this person, the prince. And actually, after looking at it more, the first assumption is that the prince is going to be Christ. But there are some things that seem like maybe the prince he's not exactly Christ, but he's kind of a type of a perfect leader who symbolizes that one day the Israelites are going to have good leadership. So let's look at chapter 14 here, or 44, sorry. Then the man brought me back to the outer gate of the sanctuary, the one facing east, and it was shut. The Lord said to me, "This gate is to remain shut. It must not be opened. No one can enter through it. It is to remain shut because the Lord, the God of Israel, has entered through it. The prince himself is the only one who may sit inside the gateway to eat in the presence of the Lord. He is to enter by way of the portico of the gateway and go out the same way." So this is the first mention of the prince. And notice it doesn't say, hey, by the way, there's going to be a prince. It just kind of casually mentions he is the guy here who can sit inside the east gate and eat in the presence of the Lord. He's the only one allowed to do that. I don't know, any thoughts on that? What's your first reaction to who this prince is? Yeah, I can see why you'd think that. And it may be. It's just if some of the details don't line up, but then again, this is quite the quirky vision. All right, so then verse 4, "Then the man brought me by way of the north gate to the front of the temple. I looked and saw the glory of the Lord filling the temple of the Lord, and I fell face down." Okay, so it makes sense. Since the Lord has returned to the temple, now he's filling it. Then verse 5, "The Lord said to me, 'Son of man, look carefully, listen closely, and give attention to everything I tell you concerning all the regulations regarding the temple of the Lord. Give attention to the entrance of the temple and all the exits of the sanctuary. Say to the rebellious house of Israel, this is what the sovereign Lord says, enough of your detestable practices, O house of Israel. In addition to all your other detestable practices, you brought foreigners, uncircumcised in heart and flesh, into my sanctuary, desecrating my temple, while you offered me food, fat and blood, and you broke my covenant. Instead of carrying out your duty in regard to my holy things, you put others in charge of my sanctuary. This is what the sovereign Lord says. No foreigner, uncircumcised in heart and flesh, is to enter my sanctuary, not even the foreigners who live among Israel. All right, so what do you guys think of that? No foreigners. Uncircumcised of heart and flesh.
They're considered unclean, so
Yeah, they are. They are unclean, and so they can't enter into the temple area.
didn't like the Gentiles.
Yeah, but I mean, we know God does like the Gentiles, and we know there's actually a riot in the book of Acts when somebody claims that Paul has brought some Gentiles into the temple area past the court of the Gentiles. So this was strictly enforced as a rule in Jesus' day. We also know that God overcame these barriers. Yeah. Well, does it represent unbelievers? That makes sense. What details make you think that? Yeah, they're uncircumcised of heart. The point was that unbelieving, evil people were coming into God's temple and running it, and he's saying, no more. You can't have these people who uncircumcised heart and flesh. Heart refers to their belief. They don't believe in God. They don't follow God. They don't worship him, and yet here they are running his temple. And so he's saying, no more of that. Yep. Yeah, they always pulled them away. The Israelites, you know, you always think, oh, I'm going to hang out with these bad influences because I'm going to influence them. And it almost always went the other way for the Israelites. There were some people who did come into the covenant, like Ruth, like Rahab, but there weren't a whole lot, you know. And it's much easier for evil to tempt the good away. And so that's what he's saying. This isn't going to happen anymore. And he goes into but a lot of detail about this. Again, you're right to say, boy, these are a lot of regulations and specific details for something that doesn't literally come true. Let's see. Look at verse 10. The Levites who went far from me when Israel went away and who wandered from me after their idols must bear the consequences of their sin. They may serve in my sanctuary, having charge of the gates of the temple and serving in it. They may slaughter the burnt offerings and sacrifices for the people and stand before the people and serve them. But because they served them in the presence of their idols and made the house of Israel fall into sin, therefore I have sworn with uplifted hand that they must bear the consequences of their sin, declares the sovereign Lord. They are not to come near to serve me as priests or come near any of my holy things or my most holy offerings. They must bear the shame of their detestable practices. Yet I will put them in charge of the duties of the temple and all the work that is done in it. Okay, so what's happening to the Levites? Yeah, is this a punishment? Yeah, now they had never been the priests. It's not like they were the main priests. It was always the sons of Aaron's who were the priests. That's a subset of the Levites. But now he's just restricting them even further, that they're not coming anywhere near any of the sacrificial stuff. They're just keeping the gates, watching the doors, maintaining the grounds, that kind of thing. They can be a bouncer, but they cannot be part of the main sacrificial event. Yep. It could have to do with that, intermarriage, or it could just be they've lost the Lord's trust. And even though there's new generations going on, just collectively, the Levites have lost his confidence and to kind of remember their unfaithfulness, and as a consequence of it, they have less duties now that they're able to do. It's not exactly, I mean, it's not the worst punishment ever. Yes?
Not as bad as when they returned from exile and those who had married foreign women and had foreign children had to eschew their foreign wives and children.
Yeah, so there's many worse things that happen, like when they have to eschew their foreign wives and children. Yeah. All right, so, and then in verse 15, he says, "But the priests who are Levites and descendants of Zadok, and who faithfully carried out the duties of my sanctuary when the Israelites went astray from me, are to come near to minister before me. They are to stand before me to offer sacrifices." So that's making clear it's the descendants of Zadok who are now participating in that. And then there's lots of rules about them, and you can compare these to what the Bible says, what the Old Testament says. Lots of rules about the priests. Let's just look at the headings. Verse 17, "When they enter the gates of the inner court, they are to wear linen clothes." All right, lots of details there. Verse 20, "They must not shave their heads or let their hair grow long, but they are to keep their hair of their heads trimmed. No priest is to drink wine when he enters the inner court." Okay, lots of details there about their personal appearance. 24, "In any dispute, the priests are to serve as judges and decide it according to my ordinances." All right, verse 25, "A priest must not defile himself by going near a dead person. However, if the dead person was his father or mother," and lots of details about that. Verse 28, "I am the only inheritance the priests have. You are to give them no possession in Israel. I will be their possession." And there you go. So most of what he says about the priests is taken from Leviticus. Not much of it is new, but he just puts it in a brief description here. Any thoughts?
Well, one thing, they blew their way to sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't pleasing to God at all.
Yeah, it wasn't pleasing to God. Anything offered to him not by faith, even if it's done perfectly according to the ritual, is not pleasing to him. But especially when they were so defiled, it had not been pleasing for some time. And the other thing is true as well. If we offer something imperfectly, but it's done in faith, God receives our imperfect offerings. However, in the Old Testament, they had to be very strict because they were under a different covenant. Let's look at chapter 45. First of all, it describes the land. "When you allot the land as an inheritance, you are to present the Lord a portion of the land as a sacred district." And then he goes into it, 25,000 cubits long, 20,000 cubits wide. The entire area will be holy. And so that's, pretty long. Let's see. The length here. Yeah, each is a foot and a half. 37,000 feet. There you go. So it's a big land. And the way it's going to be divided is totally different from the way it had been divided. It's just strips. It's like our counties. It's not at all the same shape of the original map. But I think the key is just the end of verse 1. "The entire area will be holy." And there's a sacred district in verse 3. "In the sacred district, measure off a section, that big. In it will be the sanctuary, the most holy place. It will be the sacred portion of the land for the priests." So there's a special place where the priests are in the middle of the land where the temple is. Go to verse 7. "The prince will have the land bordering each side of the area formed by the sacred district and the property of the city. It will extend westward from the west side and eastward from the east side, running lengthwise from the western to the eastern border, parallel to the one of the tribal portions. This land will be his possession in Israel. And my princes will no longer oppress my people, but will allow the house of Israel to possess the land according to their tribes." Everybody catch that? So the prince, there's the central district where the temple is, and then the prince is on either side of that, to the east and to the west. What do you think that symbolizes? At the center is the temple. Right outside of it is the prince's territory. It could, yeah, I mean, it is the center of the world. He does say that, like, because that's what he cares about. That's what he's watching more than anything. Yeah. Pardon? Okay, he's protecting it. That makes sense, too. What was different about that arrangement than the arrangement they had known with David? The old city of Jerusalem, you had the city of Jerusalem, you had the temple right there, you had the palace of David, you had everything there within the walls. Here you have a holy district with a temple in it, and then outside you have the prince's district on either side of it. Any thoughts on what that might communicate? Yeah.
I was thinking more like it was related to the sun, east and west. The sunset on the east, sunset on the west.
Okay.
Sunrise on the east, the beginning and end.
Context, sunrise, sunset.
Okay. What about the sunrise or sunset?
I'm just saying, it's
Yeah.
the beginning and the end of the day,
Okay.
and worship and everything else.
So it could have something to do with that. Something about the daily cycle. I don't know. Any other thoughts? Yep. Well, there is a separation of church and state. Yeah. And which one is central? The church. The temple is in the very center, the worship of God and God's holiness, and then the state kind of surrounds it and supports it, but is separate and subordinate to it. How did that compare to the history of Israel from David down to Ezekiel? How had the church and the state operated up until this point? God was the ruler, and he did appoint the kings. True. So God was ultimately the one in charge. How did the kings treat that arrangement? Yeah, the kings, for the most part, ignored the Lord and ran things however they wanted. Who would you say had more power during David's reign and the kings after that? The king or the priests? The king. The whole history of this time period is in the book of Kings, and if they had a good king, things were good. And if they had a bad king, things were bad. So it was in the hand of the secular, or the political, I shouldn't say secular, but the political rulers were at the very top, or in the very center, and they were controlling what the church did, or what, the religious leaders did. And now he's picturing a different arrangement, where the religious leaders, the worship of God, is central, and the government is outside of that and supports that, but not dominating that and not mixed with it. What do you think of that change? Yeah.
Overall, and he appointed singers and music makers,
Mm-hmm.
priests and chanters and all of that.
Yeah, so when you had a good king like David, things did go well, things were good. But the problem is when you had a bad king, they didn't. Yeah. So this arrangement that we see, even though it's kind of just a description of a map in geography, it's really a statement about how power is going to be used and who's going to be in charge, or the center of this new kingdom, and what's going to be on the outside, and how they're arranged and how they're related to each other. And it's actually really good. I mean, it's something we take for granted that, our church here and any church, any Christians, that is central. God's holiness, serving him, following him, that's the center of your life. And the government doesn't come in and tell us what to do. The role of government, the role of political leaders is to kind of surround the church, protect it, provide a good environment for the church to flourish and just for people to live, but not to rule it. What our religion, meaning, of course, Christ, following him, putting our faith into action, worshiping God, that is all central and should influence everything else without those things coming in and influencing what we do here. So he's kind of anticipating the idea of, give to Caesar, and to the Lord what is the Lord's. It's not exactly the same thing, but it shows that these ideas, even though it's not what was happening in the Old Testament monarchy, it is what God had in mind, and he was going to eventually get us to the place that we are today. So, anyway, any more thoughts on that? All right, then there is a description in the second half of 45 about all the different offerings they make on all the different holidays. It's almost like he's re-establishing the Mosaic covenant, because these are all things covered in Numbers and especially Leviticus, and then he's going through all of them again, and a lot of what's taken in here is the same details from the book of Leviticus. It's almost like he's saying, okay, you're going to worship me again, but this time it's not going to get corrupted, it's not going to be messed up. We're going to do it right this time. But let's go ahead and skip. So chapter 46, just lots more details about the festivals. Let's see, maybe we can just pick a random one here. Look at chapter 46, verse 13. Every day you are to provide, this is verse 13, every day you are to provide a year-old lamb without defect for a burnt offering to the Lord. Morning by morning you shall provide it. You are also to provide it with it morning by morning, a grain offering consisting of 1/6 of an ephah with 1/3 of a hin of oil to moisten the flour. The presenting of this grain offering to the Lord is a lasting ordinance. So there you go. This was something already commanded in the Old Testament. Yeah. So if you're not just going to have a new temple, but you have to reestablish everything. What was the temple for? It was for worship. The worship had been corrupted and messed up, so now you have to restart that too. Yeah, it all makes sense. It all goes together here, what the point of this is. And remember how Jeremiah talked about a new covenant? This is kind of Ezekiel's way of talking about a new covenant. It's a reestablishment of God's covenant with his people, but it's going to be different, and it's going to be bigger, and it's going to be greater. And that's really what we have here. But look at verse 47. This is something quite different. And that's what's kind of weird about this section as well. You go from 46, which is essentially restating laws from Leviticus, to 47, which is geographically impossible with the current world we live in because there's no river flowing out of Jerusalem. There is a creek, there's like a little stream that ends up in a pool, but there's never been a river in Jerusalem. So, chapter 47, the man brought me back to the entrance of the temple, and I saw water coming out from under the threshold of the temple toward the east, for the temple faced east. The water was coming down from under the south side of the temple, south of the altar. He then brought me out through the north gate and led me around the outside to the outer gate facing east, and the water was flowing from the south side. Everybody got it so far? Where's the water flowing from? Yeah. It starts out water coming out from under the east, but then it kind of flows south. As the man went eastward with a measuring line in his hand, and remember, there's a guide for this vision. And that person seems to just be an angel, not Christ. We talked about him. He's made of bronze. A cool looking guy, but not the Lord. He has a measuring line in his hand. He measured off 1,000 cubits, which is going to be, 1,500 feet, and then led me through the water that was ankle deep. He measured off another 1,000 cubits, so another 1,500 feet, and led me through water that was knee-deep. He measured off another 1,000 and led me through water that was up to the waist. He measured off another 1,000, but now it was a river that I could not cross, because the water had risen and was deep enough to swim in, a river that no one could cross. He asked me, "Son of man, do you see this?" Okay. Well, what do you think of this? Maybe some of you has more knowledge of rivers and you can pick up on something the rest of us are missing. You've got this river flowing and it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper until you can't even cross it. It's flowing out of the temple area, and we should assume it's not exactly Jerusalem because the geography is different from Jerusalem, but wherever this new temple is, or if it's just a remade Jerusalem, you got this huge river going. And is it flowing south or is it flowing east now? It goes kind of south, but then in verses 3 through 6, which way is it flowing? That would be west. So I don't think it's flowing to the Mediterranean. Did you guys get east or south? Yeah, in verse 3, as the man went eastward with a measuring line, so I think that it's kind of flowing southeast, but more or less east. But like you said, it's flowing to the Dead Sea, that general area. Now, what is the Dead Sea known for? Well, being dead. Yeah, being filled with salt and other minerals. Maybe I've mentioned before that there's some sad stories about the early people who wanted to explore the land of the Bible. Some of the European, I don't know if you'd call them archaeologists quite yet, adventurers who went sailing on the Dead Sea, and all the local people said, "You really shouldn't do that." And they said, "No, we can handle it." And they all died just from all the chemicals and stuff that they were breathing. And their ship was just floating around. And there's not a lot of waves or anything, so it's just kind of floating out there for a long time. And people could see this just boat full of dead people. So that's why they call it the Dead Sea. I mean, you'll die if you're there. I don't think there are any fish, but I think there's some bacteria or something that grows in there. Anyway, it's a very dry, salty area, and the reason that sea is that way is because the water from the Jordan flows down into it, and then there's no outlet. It just evaporates from there, and it gets filled with minerals and stuff, just like Soap Lake, where, yeah. Yeah, same thing. So now you got a river flowing from oh, by the way, and you should go to Soap Lake before you move to Florida. Just put it on your bucket list. You got to really get in the mud, too. Do you know about Soap Lake? Yeah, there you go. Did you like it?
Yeah, it's nice.
It's cool. Yeah, it's got more minerals than the Dead Sea, right here in the middle of eastern Washington. Yeah. Yeah, you do need a shower when you're done. And there are little bugs, but anyway. Everybody know about Soap Lake? It's the Dead Sea of Washington State. It's the same principle, and it's filled with minerals. You can buy. They used to make soap from it. Jason Ludeman grew up out there. He said that all the farmers would have a bucket of water from Soap Lake, and if they got a cut or something, they'd just wash their hand in it, and it would heal really fast. So anyway, sorry to get distracted on that. But the point is, it's very, very dry in that area. And now you've got this huge river, a river that they didn't have rivers like this except for the Jordan. And it's flowing into that general area. So let's go ahead and continue trying to figure out what this means. Second half of 6, then he led me back to the bank of the river. When I arrived there, I saw a great number of trees on each side of the river. He said to me, "The water flows toward the eastern region and goes down into the Arabah, where it enters the sea, the Dead Sea. When it empties into the sea, the water there becomes fresh. Swarms of living creatures will live wherever the river flows. There will be large numbers of fish because this water flows there and makes the salt water fresh. So where the river flows, everything will live. Fishermen will stand along the shore from En Gedi to En Eglaim. There will be places for spreading nets. The fish will be of many kinds, like the fish from the Great Sea, which is the Mediterranean. But the swamps and marshes will not become fresh. They will be left for salt. Interesting. Fruit trees of all kinds will grow on both banks of the river. Their leaves will not wither, nor will their fruit fail. Every month they will bear, because the water from the sanctuary flows to them. Their fruit will serve for food, and their leaves for healing. What does that sound like to you? Yeah.
It sounds like Jesus is the water of life.
Okay, Jesus is the water of life. Yeah. Jesus says, anyone's thirsty, come to me. I'll give you water and you'll never be thirsty again. Yeah. So water is often a symbol of the Spirit, of giving life, because back then you could same thing as here in the Eastern Washington landscape. You can see where the water is. You know, even looking a mile away, you see a line of trees and you can tell there's water there, because water gives life. And where there's no water, it dries out and dies. So it's a symbol of God's new life, which comes through His Spirit, through His Word. That's definitely true. Any other things that this reminds you of, maybe especially in Scripture? Or yeah, it turns it from death to abundant life. I mean, it goes from being, a hostile environment where you'll die just being there, to filled with fishermen all over the place, lots of fruit trees growing that are constantly giving their fruit. That would be a nice lake if it were actually fresh water. It would be a really pleasant place to go. And that's what he's describing. Lots and lots of different fish, lots of different fishermen. Anything else that description reminds you of? No, but it's going to be like Galilee, except for even better. So it's a description of the Dead Sea area becoming like Galilee. You kind of think of the miracle of fish. Maybe also think of the fish in the nets. You might also think of the loaves and fishes, God just miraculously providing this abundance out of nothing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, bringing death to life. And you can think of Jesus' own resurrection or the resurrection of everybody, the final resurrection. Any parts of the Bible this reminds you of? Especially the fruit trees that are growing all year round, and there being a river. Somebody said Revelation. Yeah, a lot of this imagery is used in the book of Revelation at the very end when John is getting this glimpse of heaven. The Lord is showing him a very similar picture. So that's in the New Jerusalem there. Let's see. If you want, you can either just listen or you can turn there. Revelation chapter 21 and 22. 21 has a lot of details about the size of the city and stuff like that matches what we saw earlier. But 22, the heading is the river of life. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, as clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb down the middle of the great street of the city. On each side of the river stood the tree of life, bearing 12 crops of fruit, yielding its fruit every month. This is chapter 22, middle of verse 2. And the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. No longer will there be any curse. The throne of God and of the Lamb will be in the city, and his servants will serve him. And maybe we can stop there. So this idea of a river, oh, great. Got a lot of people here at the same time, is picked up in Revelation. All right, well, since we got a bunch of kids coming with their families and stuff, we will stop there. But next time, we'll just look quickly at verse 48 and then go on to another topic that somebody had requested. All right. We'll resume in 15 minutes here.